Marijuana has been studied since the 1960s. Recently, drug dealers are trying to recreate the drug. These types of drugs are called synthetic. Sergeant Travis Jacobson works with drug enforcement. Thanks for coming on the show today.
You bet.
Well, first of all, it's a pretty general question, but what are synthetic drugs?
What we mean when we talk about synthetic drugs is any drug or any compound that's put together to mimic what real drugs do. So like synthetic marijuana, it mimics what real marijuana does, but they can make it so it's kind of legal at the time.
They can make it. How do you make something like this?
Well, most synthetic drugs, there's a lot out there that are actually made for medicinal purposes in hospitals and such that are legitimate. But a lot of these are made in laboratories in other countries maybe, or in someone's basement. I mean, that's the scary part of the synthetic drug world.
Okay, and what are the big differences between the, I guess, illegal drugs that are out there for purchase and these synthetic drugs?
Well, the illegal drugs, I mean, a lot of people do know about, the methamphetamine and the cocaine, but your synthetic drugs do practically the same thing, but unfortunately we don't know a lot about how the synthetic drugs are going to, how a person will react to them, or long-term effects is a real big question that a lot of us have had. I mean, we won't know for 15 to 20 years maybe of what are the real long-term effects of using these synthetic drugs.
Do you get the same high as you do with real drugs with these?
It's from what the studies that I've read and people that I've talked to that I've dealt with that have used it, a lot of them say it is very similar. But like your synthetic marijuana, for example, can really react differently with different people, depending on age, gender, depending on what brand they're using or smoking. It can affect you in different ways.
What are the legal consequences if you're caught with these synthetic drugs?
Well, right now in North Dakota, it's a C felony to be in possession or ingestion of a synthetic drug. The problem that we've run into is it takes a while for the law to catch up to them making the drugs, is what a lot of the issue has been.
So they're creating these things and it's changing and shifting so much it's hard to get a hold of? Is that what you mean by that?
Well, for example, let's say someone makes synthetic methamphetamine, which we refer to as like bath salts. Mm-hmm. They'll make their recipe, if you want to call it that, and then the law, maybe a new law will come out banning one of the substances that are in there, or banning the whole entire recipe. Well, then they'll just tweak their recipe enough to where it falls under legal when it comes to the word of the law.
Sure. Well, and we have a picture of bath salts and what they look like. Describe what bath salts are.
It really is synthetic cocaine or synthetic methamphetamine. Usually comes in a powder form or maybe a small rock that can be crushed into a powder. And
on the picture we see it, a package it would come in. That looks like a package you would see at a grocery store or something like that.
Yeah, they can be in like little Ziploc baggies. They can be in a twist top, like a small makeup container it almost looks like, or a small box. Or there's literally hundreds and thousands of different brands out there, and a lot of this is coming from overseas.
Well, you talk about meth, and people make meth, right? People make these bath salts as well. So what's the difference between the two?
Well, I guess the big difference between the synthetic meth and the real meth is the process of making it. They'll find certain compounds or substances that when you mix it together is going to give you that same high. And what it boils down to is your molecular structure is very similar. Like remember in science class when you looked at the, when they drill on the board, you got the octagons and the lines and all that. Yeah. If you look at the two structures for the, the fake methamphetamine versus the real thing, there might be just one more line or one less line or one less hydrogen atom, so whatever.
Subtle changes.
Yeah, subtle changes.
Well, we also have a picture of synthetic marijuana, and I was looking at this picture earlier. It looks like a tobacco. It comes in little bags. So what is this compared to the normal marijuana that we know? The
synthetic marijuana does look a lot like the real marijuana, just at face value when you see it. But really all it is it's potpourri. And the only reason that it even has a substance is because most of these synthetic compounds or materials come in a liquid or an oil or a powder form. So they need something to that the substance can adhere to so they can roll it up and smoke it. And that's why the potpourri leaves. That's really all that is.
So it's like the vehicle to get it into the body.
Right, pretty much. Yep.
Okay. And how can they be sold? I mean, where do people find this stuff?
Well, a couple years ago it was very, very easy because the law hadn't caught up with what was going on, and they were just selling them in, head shops or gas stations, depending on what state you're in. And then we had, North Dakota at least, had that, the Board of Pharmacy had put that emergency ban out, and then everything got pulled from the shelves. So, like I said, they changed the recipe just enough so it's considered legal.
Sure. And how can you tell if someone's using synthetic drugs? Is it a normal?
It's a learning process. I mean, there's no perfect scenario I can give you to say yes, that's what they're under the influence of. But the biggest thing that I've noticed personally when dealing with these people using is just very bizarre behavior.
Sure.
It's that behavior where you just look and think that someone might be just crazy, but it could definitely be synthetic drugs.
Well, one last question for you. Where do you see synthetic drugs fitting into the drug culture in the future?
Well, hopefully they're not fitting into the culture, at least used illicitly. I mean, medically, like I said before, I think there's a use for these drugs. But hopefully when legislation gets passed, if it does, it's going to make, at least in North Dakota, it's going to make it to where any substance that is taken to mimic the drug use will become illegal.
All right. Well, thanks so much for the information today. It's interesting stuff.
Yes, thank you.